Shall we start?
Yes, we can start.
Yeah. So, welcome everyone here. Actually, today's topic, which we have taken, is uh, is very important topic. But when I was giving invitations to my friends, my colleagues, my committed co-workers, they were asking, "What is this topic about?" Because I feel devolution of 3f's to strengthen the LSG is a very uncommon topic for the citizens. So we have initiated this process of discussing this topic on inadequate devolution of 3f's, functions, functionaries, and finance to strengthen LSGs. I think this is very important tool to sort out our issues which are there in the society. So Ishad has initiated this process. Uh, Actually, grassroots democracy project is very important project which has been taken by Ishad, and along with Ishad, uh, there are some co-partners. One is ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms, Commonwealth Local Government Forum, RSCD, then Abhinav uh, IT Solutions. I think these are the partners with this process. And I really welcome all our guests who are here. Actually, we want to listen to them. But just I want to brief small thing. Just now we had election in Maharashtra, and I can see the connection between these 3f's and this election. I could found three positive things and three things which are challenges for us. One is young women are coming to the process in this electoral whole uh, process of coming to the governance. Secondly, youths are coming. Thirdly, there is lot of demand. Since 2 days, I am getting so many calls that they want to learn about the governance. I think these three things are very important. Secondly, we are facing some challenges also. One challenge is unopposed elections, whether it was unopposed or opposed, we have to see. Then auction sale of few panchayats, and thirdly, which was very important from our point of view, that parties are claiming that these are number of panchayats. I think it's very important that these people, especially party workers, NGO workers, and even media people, they don't know that there is no party election at the Gram Panchayat level. I think these are the challenges which we need to take forward, and that's why devolution of 3f's is a political issue, is a power issue which we need to deal with very strategically, and that's why I found this topic is very important. We have to work very hard on this topic, and that's why I welcome all the participants who are here, and I will begin with this is divided into 5 phases. One is introduction by Saharia sir. Second is speeches by two eminent personalities, and then there will be reflections from the senior people who are here, and then we will go for question answer session, and at the end summarizing the thing, and then we will go for thanking. I think it's very important that Ishad has started this process, and that's why we believe that Saharia sir, who is the leader in this process, he is the chairperson. He is a retired IS officer. He was former chief secretary of Maharashtra state, and he was former election commissioner in Maharashtra. And we could do wonders at that time. I can describe him in 3 words. 3 words are very important for us because of this such issues can be taken forward. One is commitment, second one is capability, and third one is creativity. I think all these three aspects which I can see in Saharia sir. So I will request him to introduce this topic so that our main speakers will highlight upon it issues of the topic, and at the same time solutions for it. Thank you. So over to Saharia sir.
Thank you, Raskarji. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all the participants in this webinar on this very important subject of inadequate devolution of 3f's, that is functions, functionaries and funds to local self-governments in our country. It is generally felt that the local self-governments, that is Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies, have not been able to fully function as independent governments as envisaged under the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992. This could be due to a variety of reasons like lacunae in legal and/or administrative structures, unwillingness on the part of the governments to devolve 3f's, and failure of the local self-governments themselves to collectively exert for their legitimate role. Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies have in many cases become an extended arm of the governments only. Therefore, there is an urgent need to understand the reasons for their below expectation performances and take corrective measures in order to ensure all-round development of the country as per the vision of leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. If the local government by the local people has to succeed, I think several major initiatives are required to be taken, which will bring the local self-governments to the center stage of national polity and development. They definitely include training and empowerment of the elected representatives, more power, dignity to the State Finance Commission. Their recommendations should not be just for the recommendation's sake, they should be made binding. 3f's must be devolved to local self-governments for real and true local governance. Now, the state governments have to play a very major role in this. Fiscal decentralization must be ensured. It should not be, it is not just a political decentralization, physical decentralization has to be ensured. And I personally feel that the local self-governments must organize themselves and exert pressure both on the central government and the state government for giving them the powers which they deserve. Realizing this need, International Society of Human Awakening and Development, that is ISHAD, has launched the Grassroots Democracy Project with the objective to bring local self-governments and their elections to the center stage of national polity and development with the help of various stakeholders. This series of national webinars is a humble attempt under this project. I take this opportunity to thank large number of institutions, NGOs and individuals, including ADR, CLGF, RSCD, Abhinav IT Solutions, who have joined hands with us in this noble but gigantic task. I would like to simply elaborate about our associates, ADR, Association of Democratic Reforms. Everybody knows about it. CLGF, Commonwealth Local Government Forum, is an international organization which is working in the field of the local bodies. RSCD, Resource and Support System, organization, which is working in the field of training of the women representatives in the rural areas. I'm extremely happy and thankful that Dr. Govind Raoji and Dr. Ajit Ranade ji, who have studied this issue in great detail, are here to speak on this subject. I'm sure their views will not only add to our knowledge, but would also lead the policymakers and the decision makers to take appropriate steps in strengthening the grassroots democracy. With these words, I would like to welcome all of you once again and conclude my initial introduction. Thank you. Thank you very much. Back to Raskarji.
Thank you, Saharia sir. This is the best introduction for the topic. Now we will have two main speakers. First speaker, I have seen paper of Dr. Govind Raoji. So the paper speaks a lot of things about birth defects also, and I think that part is very important to address those birth defects in this process, because we need to address the solutions also. So actually, Dr. Rao has played multi-talented roles in socio-economic processes. Basically, he is expert in public finance. Secondly, he was a member of 14 Finance Commission, and even he is director of NIPFP. And he is playing number of roles with social sector, economic finance sector. So I will request him, because his introduction will be there. through his speech, and we are really grateful to you, sir, for giving this speech. So over to Dr. Govind Rao ji.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Let me at the outset thank Ishad for, and of course, particularly Ajit, for suggesting that there is a fellow called Govind Rao who can speak on the subject. This is an issue which has been debated quite a lot, the issue of devolving 3f's. Raskarji mentioned about political and issues of basically the issue is political and power, and Salaria ji spoke about the need for political decentralization. I think it is important that political, administrative, and fiscal decentralization have to go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, and therefore it is extremely important that any attempt at remedying the situation should deal with all the three issues. Though I will be focusing mostly on the fiscal part of it. One issue that comes to the mind is that you need to really have a framework. What sort of a framework of decentralization do we have? What are the various problems with the framework of decentralization? And the second thing is implementation aspects. What are the various implementational issues that one has to deal with if you really want a genuine decentralization to take place? For a long time, India evolved as a two-tier federation. In fact, right from the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms in 1919, that is the first time that we had the divided heads. And then, of course, you had the Government of India Act 1935, and then which is followed by the Constitution. So in the Constitution, you never come across a word like federation or a federalism. India is a union of states. And possibly there is a whole lot of centripetal bias. I do not want to go into those aspects at this moment. So it was felt that some of the states are so large that they are even bigger than many countries, and therefore it was felt that we need to go to the third tier of decentralization, and therefore you had the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution. And that Constitution was done in 1991, and an article was inserted into the Constitution 243A to O to deal with the rural decentralization, and 243P to ZG to deal with the urban part of the decentralization. But I mean, if you really look at carefully both the rural and urban part, they basically are simple reproduction of the same thing. In fact, they are identical. The question then arises when you are asking whether rural and urban decentralization is identical issue. Number two, you have at the rural level, you have the village panchayats, block panchayats, and district panchayats. In the urban areas, you have the nagar panchayats, municipalities, municipal corporations. Are the problems of various sizes of these municipalities and rural local bodies are identical, and therefore you can have one size fits all type of a thing? So one has to basically go back and then look at whether we need, whether the functions to be performed by these different types of decentralized units are the same, or are they different? And if they are different, in what way they are different? And if that is the case, then how exactly do we ensure that these governmental units are entrusted? And then it is not that you say that they are there and then you just take away. How do you really ensure that they have the powers to undertake these functions? No, in fact, the states have been complaining about the center not decentralizing enough. Now, obviously, the local bodies should be complaining. So that's why I quoted Raja Chelaya when in one of those conferences he said that everyone wants decentralization, but only up to his level, not beyond. And that's precisely the problem. States do not want to decentralize further. There is a great reluctance to decentralize. Now let me come to the some basic principles, what is called the implementation rules of decentralization. The most important thing is clarity of assignment. In economics, we have something called the cost theorem. The basic idea about the cost theorem is that you need to assign property rights. You cannot do there will not be any investment unless you assign the property rights. And then if there are ambiguities in property rights, there has to be mechanism for, so bargaining, so that, sort of this can be sorted out. So assignment of functions and sources of finance is like assigning them property rights. And without that, nothing can move. So clarity in the assignment of property rights, or clarity in the assignment of functions. And when there are overlapping functions, the mechanism to resolve these overlapping functions. And then, of course, the finances should follow the functions. It's not enough if you say that, see, these are the functions you have to perform. You need to give them the revenue handles. One of the most important things of, the advantages, is fiscal decentralization is that the local governments can vary the taxes and public services as the people desire. Catering to the diversified preferences of the people in terms of the public services is what is it. If that is the case, then obviously they should have revenue handles to vary the public services and tax base as they want. So finances should follow the functions. They should have independent sources of finance. And obviously they should have control over their own people. If you do not have the control over their own people, if you do not have control over the employees, there is no accountability. So the other important thing is that they should, in fact, the payment for public services should follow the level of public services given. There should be a linkage between revenues and expenditure. There should be a linkage. This is what we call Pixelian link. Linkage between revenue and expenditure decisions. And so these are some of the basic things that we have. So what do we have as far as India is concerned? You had the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution. Now, as I said, this is one size fits all type of decentralization. On the ground, as I had mentioned in the paper, and then as was mentioned by Raskar Saab, there is a basic birth defect in the constitutional amendment. You have the union list, you have the state list. Entry 5 of the state list basically is very clear, which says that, let me quote, local governments, that is to say, the constitution and powers of municipal corporation, improvement trust, district boards, mining settlement authorities, and other local authorities for the purpose of local self-government or village administration is entirely assigned to within the state list, which means that the states have overall control. And then in fact, local government belong to the state. And when the state government belong to the state, when they have overall control, that means that the local government do not have their own control. Somebody else is actually controlling them. They do not have the independence. This is basically given in the constitution. And unless this is done, unless they are given separate set of, sort of functions. Now then what happens? Then along with the constitutional amendment, they created a Schedule 11 and Schedule 12. Schedule 11 and 8 just have a list of functions which the state government may give to the local governments, may devolve to the local government at its discretion. Now, it's a very interesting situation. You have a list, and it says that, in fact, Article 243 G and 243 W, rural and urban part, basically says that the development planning is a state function, and now the state government can involve the local governments in doing that, and in doing so, they may also, in preparing the development plan, they may, include these items included in the 11th and 12th schedules. What does it mean? What does this 11th and 12th schedule mean at all? That means, these are supposed to be local functions, but then the state government will whether it should be given or not. So obviously, you have a very, very different type of decentralization across the country. There are states like Kerala which have given substantial this thing, and then actually at some point of time they said 25% of the plan outlay will be done at the local body level. But there are other states who, which sort of, since the entire thing is at their discretion, they never bothered about sort of giving the function. And there is a feeling that these Johnnies there don't really know. These Johnnies there don't really have the capacity. They may not have the capacity, but then we have to develop the capacity. There has to be a mechanism to do that. You can't say that since, we will do everything. So that's basically the problem. So you have the assignment system, which is not clear. There is no clarity. You have, and then going further, what about the resources? Again, the tax powers, which are some of the tax items which are put in the state list, are assigned to the local bodies. Now these local bodies are required to, they may levy them. One of the major items that is levied is basically property tax, and then of course most of the other things, and then most of the other items are not very important. Of course, in the case of Maharashtra, this octroi was one of the most important items. So at some point of time, in 2017, when GST was to be imposed, octroi was subsumed in GST. And when octroi was subsumed in GST, the municipal corporation, of Greater Bombay was told that we will give you compensation, where, we give some 4% escalation on the revenues that collected in 2016. On that, we will give 4%. But when it comes to state government, they want the central government to ensure their revenue at 14% escalation every year. You can see the difference that, sort of that. So the states want 14% escalation in the area. Now, maybe rightly so, but then they don't think that local body, the municipal corporation should, should be entitled to a similar this thing. The other most important thing is the local bodies do not have the power to levy any tax. When they are assigned these taxes, any change in the rate or the base or anything that you want to do with any discretionary changes will have to be approved at the state level. In fact, the state government, even if the MCGM wants to make any changes in the property tax or any changes it has to bring about, it has to be approved by the state of Maharashtra. Then only they can bring about the changes. Now, this is, which basically implies they don't have independent powers to levy the tax. Now, if they don't have independent powers to levy the tax, and if you say that, see, you have these many functions to perform, oftentimes in many cases it works out to be unfunded mandates. And when unfunded mandates happen, municipal corporations will say that we don't have the money. Now, Mumbai is a different case because Mumbai gets a lot of money because of transferable development rights, and then by changing the FSR. It's one of the rich municipal corporations. But that's not the case with the entire country. In most of the cases, they are starved of funds. So you have a situation where, whether it is a user charge, because user charges are supposed to be an important item in the item of revenue for the local bodies. Whether it is user charge or the taxes, this has to be approved. And then there is something called a profession tax. Now, many of the states actually have assigned the revenues from that profession tax to the local bodies. Now, what is this, particularly urban local bodies? Now, this was something like 30 years ago. They decided that, the ceiling of provision tax is 2,500. 14th Finance Commission said that for heaven's sake, it doesn't make much sense, make it 12,000. There was no action. In fact, the action taken report of the Government of India on the Finance Commission report doesn't even speak about that recommendation. And the states have not raised this particular issue. Now, so you do have a major challenge with regard to fiscal decentralization. You don't have, so they have to depend upon the state governments for the sources of revenue. And then what happens? I take the case of Punjab. It comes up simply say that, I am actually abolishing the property tax on all properties with less than 150 square yards. And same thing happened in Rajasthan, which means that you don't even ask the local bodies. You simply go about abolishing it, and the local bodies are the ones who tend to suffer. Then, so if that is the case with the one revenue, then there is a question of transfers. Now, they are supposed, the Constitution requires them to appoint a State Finance Commission every 5 years. The governor is supposed to appoint the Finance Commission every 5 years. Unless a case of the union government, at the state level, there is hardly any schedule that is followed. In fact, actually, most of the states should be having the 6th State Finance Commission at this moment. And many of them are having 3rd, 4th, 5th, because, this has been done in a random manner. And actually, there has been a certain degree of politicization of the finance commissions. In fact, the political personalities have been put. It is not the technical finance commission. So it so happens that the finance commission's report sometimes becomes unimplementable because actually the transfers are much more than what the finance commission are actually recommending. So in which case, obviously, it doesn't make much sense. But quite apart from that, even when the recommendations are made, they are never placed in the state legislature in time. There is a beautiful paper which is written by my colleagues in NIPFP on the performance of the Finance Commission in various states, and it gives a pathetic reading. Unfortunately, that is the way the finance commissions have been, state finance commission are treated. As for the Central Finance Commission is, there is only one item that is there. Article 280 has been amended to include the following thing. That is, measures to augment the consolidated fund of the states to supplement the resources of the urban or local bodies based on the recommendations of the State Finance Commission. That based on the recommendations of the State Finance Commission has been forgotten because obviously you cannot base it. And again, this does not mean that measures to augment the consolidated fund does not mean they're giving grants. But nevertheless, the finance commissions have been recommending some grants. Yeah, finance commissions have been recommending grants, and of course, oftentimes union finance commissions forget their own remit, namely that they have only supplemental role. Some 13th Finance Commission, for example, went about saying that they will do the reforms and give some performance-based grants. Then what happened was that states did not do the performance and the local bodies lost their revenue. Because, you can't really, this is what, because obviously the states were not interested in doing those 9 set of reforms. Finally, let me come to the functionaries. Now, if you really look at it, you ask in Mumbai, who is really running the municipal corporation? Nobody talks about the mayor. Everybody talks about the commissioner. Commissioner is an appointee of the state government. And you go to a panchayat, there is a panchayat secretary who is an appointee of the state government. Now, at the end of the day, it is a decentralization, not decentralization, it is a deconcentration. In fact, you see, they simply deconcentrated the power. They have appointed all the steps, in fact, most of the places, it's only the, at the panchayat level, gram panchayat level, it is only the bill collector who can be appointed, and he can be given a small amount of money. So obviously, the local bodies have to depend upon the states and has to get the entire thing approved by the states. Now, the reform of this issue would have to go in, as I said, in an incremental manner. Basically, by saying that, sort of educating that the decentralization is important, and from there, even within the given framework, how much more decentralization can be done through activity mapping and throwing some good results from various other municipalities and panchayats, and then see how, and then obviously educating, all through the thing. But unfortunately, as I said, politically, it is the state level politician or the national level politician who will actually, who wants to dominate the decision making even at the village level. Let me stop here, and I think there may be more things in that question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. It was like, defects, basic defects at the time of birth and even after birth also. You have analyzed it very well. And I feel it's very important. We need to talk about 73rd, 74th tribal self-rule, and even containment board is one of the thing. I think we have attended some meetings. They have different issues of this devolution of 3f's. So thank you so much. Now I will invite Dr. Ajit Ranade, actually who is working as a chief economist for Aditya Birla Group. He is co-founder and trustee of ADR, which is doing wonderful work at our national level. And he's expert in finance, but at the same time he is founder member of IDZG, which is formed at State Election Commission of Maharashtra. And at the same time, I want to introduce him as a very good friend of all of us. So over to Dr. Ajit Ranade.
Thank you, Bhim Raskarji, and namaskar to you, and greetings to all the participants. Thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts on this topic of inadequate decentralization, the question of 3f's, that is funds, functions, and functionaries to the lower levels of government. And I thank Mr. Sari also to invite me to speak today. Actually, Professor Govinda Rao is probably the foremost expert on issues of fiscal federalism as well as the public finance. In fact, not only he has had a distinguished career as a public finance professional, including the director of National Institute of Public Finance Policy, but of course, as Bhim Raskarji introduced him, he was also a member of the 14th Finance Commission, which is a constitutional body. And particularly 14th Finance Commission tried to make some progress in going towards greater devolution, at least as far as the funding part of is concerned, to the local bodies. So I will share some thoughts. Some of them are anecdotal, some of them are trying to emphasize certain concepts. And of course, we will leave enough time for a question and answer interaction. So I want to begin by as Govindra also said, see, India is a union of states. It is not United States of India. So in fact, India is a union of states. In some ways, the states of the country are a creation of the union. So as you know, new states were formed much later in the life of the nation, like let's say Uttarakhand or Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, so on and so forth. So there is no, of course, there is no guarantee, or you can't say perhaps in the future, instead of currently 30 odd states, we may end up with 50 states in the next few years. And a country of the size of United States, which is actually a United States of America, which is a voluntary coming together initially of a federation, with 1/3 the population of India, they have 50 states. So perhaps for the sake of administrative convenience, efficiency, it is possible that we may have 50 states. So similarly, at the state level, I believe the lower level administrative units are also creation of the state government. So for example, in the state of Maharashtra, now we have 36 districts. But not too long ago, we had 35 districts. 36th district was born very recently. And even before that, we had only 30 or 29 districts. So in that sense, the reason for this creation is, again, I would say, for the sake of administrative convenience, for the sake of administrative efficiency, and for the sake of enhancing governance also to the people. that is better governance, public governance for the people. I think that is the purpose. So that is one trend we are seeing, the creation of more districts, and therefore hopefully also sub-national, sub-sovereign entities. Um, that's first fact to remember, that this is constant evolution, constant process. Second part is again at the national level, we have a two-third, one-third asymmetry. This is a topic perhaps which Professor Govindarao will know much more. But in my understanding, two-thirds of the government's obligations or payment or expenditure obligations are actually at the state level or a lower level, lower than state level. But only one-third of the revenue power or revenue raising autonomy is at the state level. So there is a inbuilt asymmetry between the center and the states. So I'm not referring to the third level, but even between the center and states, there is an inbuilt asymmetry. I call it the two-third, one-third asymmetry. So to begin with, the state governments have inadequate funds at the state government level. Therefore, we have the constitutional mechanism of called the Finance Commission, which every 5 years is appointed by President of India, and they have to give a formula which is fair, which is transparent, to devolve the funds, to divide the funds both vertically and horizontally, to fill the gap. Because one-third, two-third asymmetry means the state government start with deficiency, and they need those devolution. So that is unfortunately a design of the way our fiscal system is, and that I think is reflected as we go down the lower level. Incidentally, the new schemes which start, for example, let's say the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, NREGA, which was passed by Parliament in 2005, created further obligation. Of course, it is funded by the central government. That is, it gives jobs, or it gives a daily wage to any worker in rural areas who asks for a job. So this is roughly for about 200 days a year. That is a guarantee. It's a legal guarantee. It's a parliamentary now guarantee, but it creates an obligation, money obligation. And no doubt a big part of it comes from the center, but a significant part of it has to come from the state as well. So this is an example of an act or of a legal obligation which has been recently created in 2005. That means additional burden. There are other, more recently, Ayushman Bharat, which says that universal health insurance to all Indians. It's again creates an obligation to provide. Who is going to give the money for health insurance for everybody, including the poor or non-poor? Again, it has to come either from the state government or from the central government. It's an example. It's in the area of health. Rural employment guarantee is in the area of employment. So there are these examples which actually, according to Constitution of India, are in the state list. These are subjects to be tackled by the states, not by the center. And yet, the evolution of our democratic system of government is that more and more centralized such schemes and new obligations are coming in. Currently, there is a farm agitation which is going on. Much of it is in the northern states around Delhi. Now, farming or agriculture is again, I would argue, a state, according Constitution of India, it is a state list item. It is something that the state government is empowered to legislate on or make policies. And yet, perhaps there are national policies going back to the 1960s called minimum support price, which is actually again a national, it's a national policy to be implemented at all state levels. So this again creates obligations at the state, central laws, central policies which create financial obligations at the state level and lower levels. On this issue of the fact how the local government may, I mentioned rural employment guarantee scheme. So let me give you just anecdotally how it began. So in 1972, just after the Bangladesh war, Maharashtra was under a very severe drought. It was reeling under unprecedented drought, and this was the second or third year of the drought. So so Chief Minister of Maharashtra wanted some financial assistance from the central government. So along with the Speaker of the Legislative Council, Mr. V.S. Page, Mr. Vasantrao Naik, Chief Minister of Maharashtra, approached the Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, for financial assistance for the state of Maharashtra to deal with the drought. So Mrs. Gandhi apparently said that because we have recently come out of the war, Bangladesh war, the state, the central treasury was totally stretched, and it was not possible to give any meaningful financial assistance. So Mr. Page said, "Don't worry," to Mr. Naik, "Don't worry, we'll go back. We are Maharashtra. We will find our own solution." And that was the genesis of the Maharashtra's Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. It was called Employment Guarantee Scheme or Rozgar Hami Yojana, ROHAYO. How was it funded? It was funded by a tax on urban workers, salaried workers. I think that is called profession tax. And the money was created, this fund was created to run rural relief work programs or drought proofing programs, whether in social forestry, tank rehabilitation, or check dams, mini irrigation systems, and this created rural employment opportunities. That was the genesis of EGS, and it was quite successful because this fund that was created by from urban workers grew over time. This started in the mid 1970s. By 1989-90, I think the corpus of this had grown to 2 or 3,000 crores, and there was such a strict vigil on this that it was said कि ये पैसा किसी और को use नहीं करेंगे, meaning even if there is a surplus, it will carry over from year to year. And in fact, it was quite successful, at least in mobilizing the funds. This is an example of very local effort, which was able to solve a local problem. And this is a true spirit of decentralized governance, that Maharashtra found a solution to its own problems. And but as against this, another example I'll give. There is a small village called Dabhol, Dabhol, in Ratnagiri district. And they were told that in the panchayat city limits there was a panchayat, not city, panchayat limits, there was going to be a big project worth 12,000 crores, and this was going to be a power project. And so they thought, oh, wonderful. So the latest technology, there'll be lots of engineering work and sophisticated, it was a very state-of-the-art project. And so they said, okay, we will charge you a small tax, a tiny tax of maybe 1% or 0.5%, so that we can build a local hospital in the panchayat periphery, in the vicinity, in the precinct. This is the famous story of Dabhol Power Corporation, or Enron, as you know it. And this would be costing, I don't know, perhaps I don't know, remember the budget, but maybe some 10-20 crores. 12,000 crores, they thought surely this project can afford a small tax, property tax. This case went all the way to the Supreme Court. So it was denied, and finally they lost in the Supreme Court. And poor Panchayat of Dabhol was unable to find funds to build a hospital. And this was a sharp rebuke that your local government does not have the right to tax. You do have no right to raise your own resources. This would have benefited not only the villagers themselves, but I think in the whole area, in the block. This is a famous case of Enron, but of course, you know what happened to Enron, so that's not a very happy story. But this is an example of how when we talk about funds, functions, and functionaries, this was an example where surely the fund, it was very reasonable in most of the developed countries. This kind of power of taxation is there with local governments. And this was an example where it is not there. As Mr. Govindrao said, actually the decisions are taken at the Mantralaya level, at the state government level. And so unless you have some kind of decentralization of this autonomy, taxing autonomy, they will not be able to meet the obligations that local governments have to the people. Increasingly what happens is that the people in a democracy, the interface of the people or citizens with the government is at the very local level. In fact, many of the issues that affect our daily lives, like condition of the road, traffic, water supply, street lighting, or local law and order situation, public nuisance, all of this, much of it is actually the domain of local government. In fact, if you, since Mr. Govindrao mentioned the constitutional provision, for our local urban bodies, there are what are called obligatory functions and discretionary functions. So obligatory functions are supply of drinking water, construction of maintenance of streets, lighting, watering the streets, cleaning public streets and sewers, then maintenance and support of public hospitals, registrations of births and deaths, and all these. These are obligatory functions. But this requires money. This requires funds. There are also additionally discretionary functions laid out in the Constitution, like district planning or city planning, or construction and maintenance of public parks, gardens, libraries, museums, public buildings, or planting of trees. Increasingly, things like solar energy, water harvesting, housing for low-income people, or provision of transport facilities in the city of Mumbai, the BST bus system. Now, how these are the kind of things that the average citizen, that is the expectation from government, that is the interface. And yet here is where there is hardly any funding autonomy. Like he said, if you ask a random person in city of Mumbai or maybe Bengaluru, or I don't know, Bengaluru, but many parts of India, if you ask who is the mayor, I think it will be difficult for most people to answer this question. On the other hand, if you remember 9/11, the September 2001 attack in those twin towers in New York, the person in front of everybody and who gained a lot of prominence was the mayor of New York City, Mr. Rudy Giuliani. He, of course, was recently also very prominent in Mr. Trump's election. But he was the face of the government, whether it was fire engines, whether it was police order, whether it was rehabilitation, he was the face. Same thing is true in China, that it is the mayor of large cities or mayor of smaller towns who is the face to the people. In fact, in China's system of government, it is the mayorship of large cities like Shanghai is a stepping stone to higher levels in government. Ultimately, even many of the former presidents of China, or at least premiers, have been former mayors of cities or towns. I think in India, I don't know, with due respect to Mr. Saria, since you have been chief secretary, a bureaucrat's experience at the lowest level of government is more or less like a punishment posting. वो तो करना पड़ता है, तो, but that's not the ticket to a sterling career later on. Actually, but it is this people, I think, if the decentralized system is allowed to survive, then a more pervasive sense of ownership develops, and bureaucrats who have worked at lower levels in such systems, in decentralized systems, they often become more sympathetic to people's issues. They are more they develop greater empathy and understanding, and also information flow to civil servants is much better if they are involved in those when I say functions and functionaries. And the responsiveness, of course, and effectiveness of governments is enhanced. So I think, whereas here, I think one of the reasons that the devolution does not happen of functions and functions, because the state government feels that there is not adequate capacity in local governments to tackle with these questions, and therefore there is hesitation. ये उनको नहीं transfer करेंगे. And this is unfortunately a vicious cycle. If you don't experiment, then the local expertise and capacity building will not happen. And if you because it's not there, it is not transferred. Same thing about functionaries. Once a functionary, a bureaucrat gets a position in a mantralaya, there is great hesitation. Of course, I mean, I'm just giving my general impression, but there is great hesitation to be transferred to a local government. So, however, for deepening of democracy, for really robustly functioning democracy, if we want, that is our goal and that is our desire, then it's absolutely important that we strengthen the local governments, whether it's urban bodies or rural bodies. In fact, not many people may know that I think it was 2008, there was a Supreme Court judgment which clearly spelled out that the powers of the State Election Commission and the powers of Election Commission of India are exactly on par. Their constitutional importance is exactly the same. and yet there is disproportionate interest, disproportionate publicity, and awareness about the elections to the either parliament, MPs, members of parliament, or to MLAs. But hardly any attention is paid to the election to the local bodies like municipalities or panchayats. In fact, even as we speak, last week only Maharashtra finished almost half, meaning Maharashtra has something like 27,790, almost 28,000 panchayats, out of which half of them had their elections in the middle of COVID. And that is almost more than 14,000. But I don't think there was hardly any, by comparison, uh, proportionately, hardly any awareness of elections to the state election, state body, local bodies. In fact, a new troubling phenomenon was that, by the way, these elections to local governments, since they are closest to the people, they are not actually supposed to be fought on party symbols. That is the constitutional requirement. So they are not even supposed to be fought on the basis of political parties. So you have good candidates, and you have you fight elections on your own merits, or your public service record. This is now, for those of us who live in cities, think of our building societies, housing societies, cooperative societies. The elections are held, you don't fight on the basis of whether you're BJP or Congress or Samajwadi Party or whatever. It is supposed to be with, so the same spirit is supposed to be there even in panchayat election. But the trend has been, and even in a state of Maharashtra, which I consider to have made much more progress in this local body election and governance, it is increasingly fought along party lines. So, the political party, the divisions of parties fighting is there all the way to the deepest root. Not only that, a troubling new phenomenon, which is not the topic for today, but I just want to mention it, is that now they are announcing that if you get an unopposed panchayat leader, we will give you money as high as 2 crore rupees. Where is this money coming from? Nobody knows. Very, very opaque. And now these awards are also being endorsed by state governments, not in Maharashtra, but some other governments. So, in fact, you will be surprised to know that out of the 14,000 elections that we had, more than 11%, that is 1,500 panchayats, were unopposed based on this incentive. Where is the money coming from? It's again along party lines, and so on. So, instead of strengthening the local governance, I think this is a sign of weakening. So this I think Mr. Govindrao referred to centripetal force versus centrifugal force. So I'll just conclude in the next 1 or 2 minutes. While we should be seeing a much more strengthening of decentralization, because that is, according to me, the surest way of strengthening and deepening democracy, we are seeing forces of centralization. I compare, since this year 2021 is 30th anniversary of our 1991 reforms, economic reforms. The 91 reforms to me was more about spirit of decentralization. The central power of licensing, central power of regulation was dismantled, and more powers were given to decentralized departments. Whether it was approvals, whether it was self attestation. The spirit was, I think, more decentralization, more deregulation. But after 30 years, we are seeing tendencies of more and more centralization and central regulation. Whether it is GST, I don't want to it's a moot point now. It's almost 4 years old. We can't put the genie back in the bottle. But one nation, one tax is nothing but state governments have surrendered the right of tax autonomy. They have given up their rights, and it is all now centralized. But many other things are going in that direction. So I think this topic today is very, very important. That how do we strengthen the process of decentralization? How do we strengthen the process of giving, devolving not only funds, functions, and functionaries, but also actually power, democratic power? Because ultimately, democracy is all about how power is devolved and distributed in different sections of society. So I'll stop here, and then we'll be happy to take questions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Ranade. We have said the true spirit of these 3F's, and in both the ways, I think the challenges which we want to face, we are facing it, and even the concerns and true stories, which are the positive stories of Maharashtra. Thank you so much. So now we are going for open session. Open session is divided into two aspects. One is we are going for, there are some eminent personalities here who are really working on this issue. So one session is reflection from such personalities, such delegates, and second then we will go for question answer session. So in the beginning, for these reflections on the basis of these two talks and even whatever Saharia sir has said in the beginning, I think we request Naresh Saxena to share his reflection on the talks which has been given here. So Naresh Saxena and Mukulika Banerjee, both of them, we are requesting this. So may I request Naresh Saxena to share his thoughts? Hello. हाँ sir, please. Your mic is unmuted.
It's on mute.
Yeah.
Please unmute.
Unmute. Okay.
It's muted.
Mr. Saxena, it is on mute. Please unmute it.
Unmute it.
Balbir ji. हाँ.
On the left hand side, you have that button. Please you unmute. On the left hand side, bottom left hand side, you touch to the screen. You will see a button.
There it is written mute. Make it.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry, we are not able to hear you, sir. No. क्या करते हैं?
We should go to Mukilka Banerjee, and then when Saxena sir's thing becomes all right.
Okay.
Yeah, let's take Mukulika first.
Yeah. So may I request Mukulika Banerjee?
Yes, certainly. I can offer some comments.
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm sorry I had a slight issue at home, so I couldn't hear Mr. Govindrao's talk, and it's my loss, but I hope to catch up later. But I did hear Mr. Ranade in full, and it was so timely, important. I can't stress how important it is. Now, I'm a professor at the London School of Economics. I've been working on Indian elections for a long time, for a very long time. But all my research has been based in a village in West Bengal. So I have seen about 15 elections firsthand, Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha, and Panchayat. And I cannot underscore enough Mr. Ranade's point that all the hype is about the Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha and the Election Commission of India and how it conducts elections. In fact, our book in 2014, Why India Votes, is the result of a comparative study of the Lok Sabha elections across India. And we looked at the functioning of the Election Commission of India in great detail. And I think it was important to understand that, and a number of scholars have now done it. But what it does mean is that our understanding of the Election Commission of India is very good at the moment. But we all think, and I can share this with this group, and many of you may have encountered this, when I talk to other academics who've been studying Indian politics for decades, they don't recognize that panchayat elections are not conducted by the Election Commission of India. Now, that's a little bit worrying, because it is, when you look at voters, and again, I appreciated Dr. Ranade's point that, for the ordinary citizen, the first interface with the state of India, the government of India, is at the local level. And that's why when you look at voter turnout figures for India, the highest turnout rates are for panchayat elections. Actually, people are most enthusiastic about voting. They know the candidate's name. They know they're definitely going to vote. So for them, they know that their everyday existence is going to be impacted by the panchayats working in somewhere like West Bengal. Of course, it has a particular story, but certainly national election study surveys by CSTS Lokniti show that panchayat turnouts are always higher. So I think the citizen understands this. Civil servants and specialists like this group understand it, but a wider public understanding of this is completely and utterly missing. So I really appreciate Mr. Saharia's work that he's been doing, he and his colleagues, which I've learned about in the last year or so, which has been absolutely tremendous to build a network of state election commissions in the country and to actually gather some information and to point out, which this group will know, what a huge variation there is across Indian states and how the State Election Commission itself is constituted. There is no harmony there. There is no one template that is followed. The State Election Commissioner is differently appointed in different states of India. So as an academic, I can say that this is absolutely critical new research, which I am hoping that we can develop, and starting with Maharashtra, because there is such a wonderful, and Mr. Saharia is there for guidance and for research design. So this is one set of things. If I may have a couple more minutes, I just wanted to say the other, listening to Dr. Ranade was like my research proposal that I've just applied for a big grant here in the UK. I've just submitted it last week. And if that comes true, his 2 points are exactly the way that I have been looking at my own research. I studied elections all these years. And then I realized that when you look at state election commissions, but you look at local government, the bigger point of local government itself, it really is about taxation. It's about the ability to raise revenue. And again, talking to Mr. Saharia and his colleagues last year when we had a meeting at LSC, was knowledge that all of you as functionaries, as civil servants, as specialists have, which again is missing in the academic literature, is that the capacity to raise revenue at the local level is so low. And the reasons why it has been kept like that are political reasons. And like you said, what you told us about this 2 crore reward for an unopposed, who is putting 2 crores? The fact that we don't know the source of this money is quite extraordinary, isn't it? That we can't trace it. Our electoral funding has been institutionally made opaque now through electoral bonds. And now even in informal payments, if I was doing research, if I was on the ground at the moment, I would actually go and talk to one of these recipients of 2 crores and ask them, how never mind what the source is, they can't reveal that, but how did the process happen? Who approaches them? How do they find out that there is this reward possible? But the final thing to say is also that the history of taxation in India from each state has its own story. Now, again, the Maharashtra story and this professional tax, this is a very steep learning curve for me because it's a brand new elections I can talk about for hours. But taxation, I'm just beginning. Now, the story that you told us about the professional tax, that's a fascinating story. Does it still continue? Can I ask, Dr. Ranade?
Yeah, it still continues, yeah.
Yeah, see, now how many people sitting in Pune or Mumbai or Aurangabad actually know that they are still, in cities, know that they are paying this, how is it taxed? How does the revenue stream then go to how is it collected, this proportion, whatever proportion you told us of the profession tax? When you ask, again, I'm a sociologist, a social anthropologist, I always begin with the citizen. And so I'm very interested in asking ordinary Indians in different parts of India, what taxes do you think you pay? Now, in India, I think we tend to, when somebody asks you this question, you immediately think of income tax. And there are some people, a very small proportion of India pays 10 to 12% pays income tax, and they think they're subsidizing the rest of the country. But of course, the fact that we have such a range of indirect taxes, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that actually it's a very non-progressive taxation system. The poor person a rickshawala is paying the same tax on a packet of biscuits as any of us are. And that is unfair. It's an unfair taxation system, but there is an issue about collecting tax perhaps because it is taxed. So just to conclude, I think, in the development literature, my colleagues in international development at LSC work on this theme of centralization and decentralization. And the important data from across the world shows that real human development happens when there is fiscal decentralization. Comparative data shows this across the world. If that is the case, then what are we doing in India? What do we need to do? And clearly, from everything I've heard today from Dr. Ranade, and I'm really very, very sorry for having missed the first talk, is that if we have to fiscally decentralize, as we heard, the trend is actually going in the opposite direction of greater centralization, of much less power being taken away from local bodies. So I hope we can talk about this a bit more. And also, I know, we don't know what the solutions are always, but I hope we can work towards actually generating more discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mukulika Banerjee. Actually, we have State Election Commission of Delhi. And so I want to request Sanjay Srivastavaji to give his reflections on this, whatever we have presented here. And even Banerjee Madam also suggested new things, which he has supported. So, Srivastav sir, your reflection, please.
You have to unmute. Yeah, unmute.
Sir, mic on.
Please unmute yourself.
Mic off hai. Unmute yourself. Unmute.
See, the host has to unmute him. He can't do it himself.
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, it's okay.
Greetings to all of you, distinguished colleagues and distinguished people who are in this field and working so well. I'm sorry I joined late. I missed the Mr. Govind Rao's talk. Mr. Ranade talk, of course, I was there, and Ms. Banerjee also. And I'm representing the state election commissioners. I've been chairman of the committee. Many issues have been raised in the today's discussion, and some of them are very crucial for us to take it further, where many issues are not being handled well by the government vis-a-vis state election commission, and where we have to play a collective role also. So standing committee meeting will be after 10-15 days. So we'll be taking up these issues. We have noted down the points raised so validly and so well. And my comments is that we will confine this our observation in our group, and I will see that how we can improve the our working vis-a-vis sensitivity of the government, where State Election Commission and the through us local bodies have to give more involvement. We'll work on this. And thank you so much. I'll speak. I'll limit myself to this only. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Srivastavji. Can we get reflections from Saxena sir?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, please
okay,
go ahead.
Good. I would like to concentrate on rural panchayats. As you know, there's a great deal of variation from state to state. There are regions like Western Maharashtra or South Karnataka, where there is a great deal of social capital and panchayats work quite well. But when you look at UP or Punjab or Haryana or Bihar, these are the regions where either because of factionalism or because of large number of other problems. Panchayats don't work very well. So therefore, one needs to see how panchayats can be strengthened. Uh, I mean, I would say argue that authority and responsibility should go together. You can should certainly give authority of funds, functions, and functionaries, but how to make them more accountable is also an issue. Interestingly, when elections take place, whether at the for the assembly or parliament or etc., no candidate ever says, they make all kinds of promises, we'll give you this, we'll give you free food and free house. No one ever says that we will make panchayats strong, because that is generally seen by people as a strengthening sarpanch, not the gram sabha, not the common people. And someone said that, look, 90% people vote in gram sabha panchayat district panchayat elections. But when a Gram Sabha meeting is called, hardly 10% people turn up. So why, when 90% people vote, why don't they come and attend Gram Sabha meetings? Those are the issues. I would like to suggest that panchayats should be given more authority and responsibility in social subjects like education, like managing village commons, like nutrition. Sarpanch is interested only in construction activities. He wants to get money from the state and he wants to spend it. He wants to feel powerful. Any such activity which will mean people should come together in order to improve administration, whether it is village commons or education or health, in those things, they are not interested. So that's how we should involve them in social sector. And then, as I think was said by Mr. Govindrao also, that panchayats should be given power to collect taxes. I am not interested in imposing new taxes. Let's look at the existing taxes of land revenue, irrigation cess, which are collected by government. Why don't these taxes are collected by the village panchayat, so that when they collect their taxes, government can give more money? 14th Finance Commission had made some recommendation, but I still think that in many states, especially North and Central India, village panchayats are not collecting taxes. So tax collection would certainly help them. And then we should grade panchayats. If we start grading panchayats, then we will find that those panchayats which are graded, which are doing well, they can be given more authority. Today, even in Narega, you find that although 50% money is spent by the village panchayats, but it is subject to large number of checks. And those checks can be relaxed for those panchayats which are in grade 1. Then there should be timely audit. Panchayat audits is pending for many years, you find, and they are also subject to corruption. But timely audit is very important. Transparency is totally missing. Why don't we say that the weighing of children in ICTS would be done in a Gram Sabha meeting rather than being done at the center? So therefore, transparency in all the activities which happen at the village level has to be encouraged. And lastly, we should also, I would like to say that, this model that we should have a strong panchayat but weak district administration is not a viable model. If you want a strong panchayat, then you must also think, why is the district administration so poor? You find in states like Bihar, Jharkhand, especially in many states, even funds do not get transferred. The para teachers or the Rozgar Sahayaks, they get the salaries after 3 or 6 months. So if administration is so poor that they cannot even disperse their salaries, it is not a very viable model that panchayats can do everything and this district administration will remain weak. We have to strengthen both, and I think governance needs to improve. So therefore, I'm all for transfer of FFF, but we should also think of how to improve the accountability of village level institutions.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Saxena. Now we'll go for a question answer session. If on the basis of the reflections and even the talk which has been given just now, so if you have any questions, and even I will request, like Dalip Singh ji is there from State Election Commission Haryana, Jagdeep Chokar ji is there, so they also can share their reflections. But before that, if we have any questions for the speakers, please go ahead and ask the questions. Yeah, Sharat Kumar ji. Sharat Kumar ji, Sharat Kumar ji, shall we? You can share. Sharat Kumar ji, please.
Yeah. This assembly and parliament are the two places where all policy matters are discussed. However, in a local self-government, the corporators are more concerned with the quality of life of a citizen. Therefore, just as Gram Panchayat, the candidates cannot use the party symbols. Similarly, why not the municipal corporations election also, party symbol should not be there, and the candidates voting should be more on the caliber of the candidates towards quality of life.
Okay.
That is my point.
Yeah, yes, submission. Thank you. So I request all the participants, delegates, if you have any query, clarification, if you want to add something, please go ahead. So Dr. Rao and Dr. Ranade, I have one question. Till that, if you get some question from other participants, I have one very important thing in my mind. Actually, we are working with elected leaders in panchayats. So basically, changing the laws, making the resolutions is one thing which is very important. But simultaneously, devolution of 3f's is not the issue of voters. This is not the issue of citizens, and that's why this has become like a non-issue in panchayats. This has become non-issue in 74th Amendment. So it's very important that how to do this, because voters and citizens are not considering this as an issue. So how to convert this non-issue into issue, because all of us are saying that this is very important issue. But at the same time, our citizens and voters are not considering this as an issue. So what can we do about this? So Dr. Rao, Dr. Ranade, if you can give some insights on this.
So can I go first, Govinda?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
No, I gave the example, of course, it's only an anecdotal example, that in Dabhol, that those villagers thought that they could build a, if not a hospital, at least a clinic or a dispensary, and maybe enhance the quality of their school. That is definitely an issue for the local population. So there is a connection between how much improvement you can have, as Mr. Sharad Kumar said, quality of life, whether improved quality of your classrooms or the dispensary or street lighting. There is a connection between that and how much funds are available. So I don't think it may be a non-issue because the connection is not obvious, made transparent to the people. That the funding autonomy and how the level of governance that you get, there is a connection. And like I think Mr. Dr. Saxena also said, what is becoming important is who controls the panchayat. Because more and more funds are getting transmitted now through intermediated through the panchayat. For example, NREGA payments through the panchayat, rural gram development funds through the panchayat. So in that pipe now, more and more money is going through. So whoever controls, sitting on the tap, perhaps is getting disproportionate importance. But that's not the point. I think the point was to decentralize and give more autonomy to the decision making. Like suppose this much funds is available to panchayat, can we make a decision collectively कि यहाँ पे एक dispensary बनाएंगे या एक library, we will increase one more room in the school. This kind of a decision making. So I think it is. I would argue it is connected to the funding issue and the 3f's.
Yeah.
Let me add to what Ajit mentioned. There is a lot of obscuring that has taken place in recent times. See, the panchayats have two types of functions to perform. One is the provision of local public services. And the second one is the agency function. The agency, basically the implementation of various centrally sponsored schemes that are they are asked to implement, including the NREGA. Now, what has happened is that much of the money that is coming is from the agency function. And then, of course, and then when you have some lump sum money from coming from either the Central Finance Commission or the state finance, for state government, that is taken for granted. So basically the focus is on, not on the delivery of local public services, but basically the implementation of, various centrally sponsored schemes. So there is a lot of obscuring that has taken place. One of the things that has to be done is even the panchayat members themselves may not be knowing what their functions are. I think there has to be concerted attempted, by the people who do the advocacy, to do the activity mapping at the, sort of in various states of what the panchayat's functions are, what are the basic functions they are supposed to do. And of course, the schedule 11 and 12 doesn't really tell you where the things are. So you need to do the activity mapping. And then from there, obviously, there has to be much greater issue of, particularly when they have the Gram Sabha. And as was rightly mentioned, there are very few people who really attend the Gram Sabha. So there has to be an interest in, sort of their incentivization in attending the Gram Sabha, where these issues, functions, these 3f's and the need for, need to devolve them must be really made out. But then today we don't even, even at the many level, we don't know what their functions are because there is no activity mapping. It varies from state to state. And so this is it's a big task. I think the basic thing should begin from here to say that what they need, they themselves should know what their functions are.
Thank you. There is a question for Choker Saab that is ADR doing work on panchayat and municipal elections? This is for Choker Saab from ADR. This is from Mukulika Banerjee madam. Choker sir hai ya Ranade sir aap jawab denge?
Yeah, I replied to her by chat that we are doing work on local elections, but not in all states of India. In Maharashtra, surely, in Orissa, in Jharkhand, but unlike our work in for MLAs and MPs, which is across every state of India and every election and by-election, at least for local bodies. And the challenge there is because for example, in Maharashtra, for MLAs, there are only 288 MLAs, but there are 29,000 elections to panchayats. So there are 29,000 elections are conducted, multiplied by say 10 candidates. So almost 3 lakh candidates have to be analyzed. So unless the whole process is electronic and the time gap available is hardly few days. So Maharashtra was one of the few states which went fully electronic, and therefore it was possible to do the analysis of candidates, their background, and dissemination to the voters. So unless the state government, state election commission makes it electronic, otherwise it's difficult to disseminate. But we are doing it in some states of India. Jharkhand, Orissa, Maharashtra for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Then Deepak Negi is activist working. He was working with ADR. He wants to ask some question. Negi sir, please.
Good evening, sir. I will speak in English. As per the topic of the webinar, the devolution of 3f's. What is the reason of, what is the reason why these local bodies are not provided these F's, funds, functions and functionaries? So in one of the conferences which ADR and State Election Commission organized few years ago, some speakers told that the person who is a MP or MLA, he don't want there is a threat to his seat. So that's the reason they said that they are deliberately not providing these 3f's to the people. Otherwise, वो MLA बन जाएगा, MP बन जाएगा, तो फिर उसको कौन पूछेगा? So I just wanted how to tackle this challenge.
तो नेगी ये तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ने दिया हुआ है. So मतलब it is a question of implementing what is in the constitutional amendment. Of course, you are right. It is not mandatory. The 73rd and 74th amendment, what it lays down is not mandatory but recommendatory. But I'll leave it to Mr. Govindra to add more to this point.
Basically, it's a question of power structure. Now, if sort of the basic issue is that the central politician or the state politician would like to have the control over the local politician. So it's and whenever you have that sort of a power structure, you have that. That's one of the reasons why, you know, in places like Kerala, panchayats are powerful because, you know, they are able to assert themselves, whereas in other places, you know, even the local politician will simply run after the state, and you know, basically it's a question of patronage distribution in a simple you know, sort of manner. Nothing, I can't say anything more because I don't have much of an experience in these areas.
May I say something here?
Yeah, Saxena ji. हाँ, Dr. Saxena.
मैं दो बातें कहना चाहता हूँ. एक तो ये, this point is right, that because our administration is mostly patronage based, therefore MLAs, MPs, or state government officials would not like to give up patronage. So administration has to be, not patronage based. It has to be better governance or people based or outcome based. That's number one. The second point that no one has mentioned is that both in the urban municipalities and also in rural areas, the more powers are vested with the district level panchayat and the block level panchayat. Okay, the Zilla Parishad and the Gram Sansad, or whatever they are called. These are indirectly elected. So therefore, what happens is that the district panchayat, which is where the head is indirectly elected, he considers himself responsible to those 20-25 members and not to the entire district. So that's a very important point. Let's also not forget that in Pakistan, the government had abolished about 20 years back the post of the district collector, and they said all power should be with the district Zilla Parishad Adhyaksh, who is called Nazim there. Only recently, Imran Khan, when he came back, he restored the power of the district collector, because the experience was that these Nazims were accountable only to these members, and they would handing over contracts to them rather than doing something for the people. So therefore, just giving 3F's without accountability is not a very good idea.
Thank you, doctor. Actually, now we have to finish this by 5 o'clock. So a lot of thoughts are there. Only thing is that we cannot go for questions now. I really appreciate that Dalip Singh ji from State Election Commission Haryana is also here. He was the participant, and even Sanjay Prasad ji, State Election Commission Gujarat. And I think it's very important that so many important delegates are here. And
रास्कर जी 2 मिनट देंगे उनको, संजय प्रसाद और दलीप सिंह को.
मुझे एक दो चीजें
प्लीज
मैं बहुत संक्षिप्त में कर दूंगा. जैसे कि जो हम लोग पंचायत के बारे में बात करते हैं तो सिर्फ ग्राम पंचायत के बारे में बात करते हैं, और तालुका पंचायत, जिला पंचायत के बारे में कोई अध्ययन भी नहीं होता है और कोई हम लोग विचार में आते तो नहीं है. और इसका कारण क्या है कि अगर आप महानगर पालिका में देखें तो पानी पुरवठा, ट्रांसपोर्ट, बिजली, सभी चीजों का संकलन और उसका पूर्ति जो है कि वो महानगर पालिका करती है, जबकि पंचायत में ये सभी सत्ताओं जो है वो सब स्टेट एजेंसीज के पास है, जिसके कारण बहुत विलंब भी होता है और जहां पहुंचना चाहिए वहां पे नहीं पहुंचता है और जहां नहीं चाहिए वहां पे राजकीय दबाव से आ जाता है. तो इसमें जो है कि हम लोग को जिला पंचायत, तालुका पंचायत में भी संपूर्ण विकेंद्रीकरण हो. पहले 60-70 के दशक में ये चला था, लेकिन फिर धीरे धीरे और केंद्रीकरण हो गया है राज्य सरकार के लेवल पे. तो इस पर विचार करना चाहिए. दूसरा मेरा संक्षिप्त पॉइंट है कि जो पेशा एक्ट है, पंचायत एक्सटेंशन टू शेड्यूल्ड एरिया एक्ट है, सोसाइटी जो अनुसूचित जनजाति के लोग हैं जो जंगल में रहते हैं और जिनकी उपेक्षा भी होती है और संपूर्ण रीते उनका शोषण भी होता है और ज्यादा टाइम वो मजदूरी करने इधर से उधर भटकते रहते हैं. तो इन लोगों को ये जो पेशा एक्ट है उसमें जो सत्ता मिलना चाहिए वो सत्ता भी उनको मिले और उसके ऊपर भी अध्ययन होना चाहिए और अच्छी तरह उसके ऊपर भी काम होना चाहिए. क्योंकि सिर्फ हम लोग ऐसे ही सामान्य पंचायत, ग्राम पंचायत इसी पे केंद्रित करके बात करें तो पंचायती राज का जो संपूर्ण दायरा है उसके ऊपर अध्ययन नहीं होता है और उसके कारण बहुत से ऐसी सेवाएं हैं जिससे ग्राम लोग वंचित रह जाते हैं। ये मेरा कहना था। थैंक यू।
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Even I would request Dalip Singh ji if he has some reflections. Haryana Election Commissioner, please.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm Dalip Singh. I'm State Election Commissioner of Haryana, right now calling from Chandigarh. Well, I heard Dr. Ranade, I've heard Dr. Rao in great detail, and I also heard other participants. And I'm very happy that Mr. Saharia is organizing these talks, and this is the second talk on the PRIs and local body elections. We have been conducting the elections of Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha, Panchayats, and the local body for the last 40 years. All IAS officers who are in this group. So this is a topic which is not new to us. But right now, for the last 4 or 5 years, I'm State Election Commissioner, and my job is to conduct the elections to all the Panchayati Raj institutions and the local body institution called municipalities and municipal corporation. Now, here one or two issues I would like to raise. One, that nobody won these elections. Even after 73rd amendment and 74th amendment to the Constitution, which is almost 25 years, and 5 general elections to PRIs and local body elections have taken place. 5. Whenever election day comes nearer, the political parties or the incumbent government would try to some certain activities like the delimitation, etc. And elections are never held in 5 years. Whereas the Constitution says that election must be held, as in case of Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha, must be held before the expiry of 5 years. But Haryana, and I know so many other states, where elections are never held within 5 years. This is one thing. So this shows the seriousness of the state government or whatever the competent authority about the from was saying that there is hardly any literature. There are a lot of books on Lok Sabha election, Vidhan Sabha election, but I am surprised that there is not even a single book written on state election and their role, and so we can probably distribute it all over the country and disseminate the knowledge. I tried to write one book for the last 1 or 2 years, but even I have not been able to do it so far. So I think the ADR or maybe the London School of Economics professor who was there, they should do some activity on that and write books on and what impact these elections have made. Like in Haryana, we introduced education qualification for the local body elections. So that has brought a very good impact on in the system. Like we have a minimum of metric qualification, which is not there all over the country. I mean, except 1 or 2 states, but rest of the country there is no qualification. So most of the time the illiterate people are coming. So Haryana became the first state where we implemented the education system. It is going on. Third is about the funding. Out of the 3F funding, as rightly said by I think Mr. Ranade, 1/3 and 2/3. Right. So the all important jobs, all important functions have been given to these local bodies, whereas they have no source of revenue. So much so, you'll be surprised to know that they cannot even pay their salaries on the first day of the month. They get their salary around 20th or 25th or so. The first we give the salaries to the sweepers, the Safai Karamchari, and so on. There is no money, and there is hardly any funding, hardly any budgeted funding from the state government. I mean, very, very little, very, very little. And then there is a multiplicity of organizations working on the same place. I'll give you the example of Gurgaon, which is next door to Delhi. Like we have a municipal corporation, which is the weakest organization because hardly any funding. We exercise doing the same function which municipal corporation is supposed to do. We have Haryana Urban, which do the same function which municipal corporation is supposed to do, and a very rich body. We have now Gurgaon Development Authority. We have Gurgaon Metropolitan Development Authority, and so on. all these authorities are rich, whereas the municipal corporation is expected to raise its own money. So this has to change somehow. We should have and I think that's all. And for today, and I'm very happy to participate. Any help you need from us, from Haryana, we will be very happy. And at least I expect that we should have more literature on it. Even we face this problem every day. That when we say I'm a state election commissioner, people immediately say yes, you got the Lok Sabha election conducted very well. So this is the impression that state election commissions are supposed to be good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Singh sir. Now we'll go for a thanking session. It's very important that I learned a lot in IRMA that to strengthen the local democracy, there is a doctor, and that doctor is devolution and reservation. So on reservation, we are doing something, but devolution, we need to do a lot. So there is a slogan that "Gaon gaon mein ho sarkar, bato Delhi ke adhikar." I think slogan should not become a slogan, and for that, such sessions, action plans are very essential. So I will request Bhutada sir, who is a professor, and
Raskarji, before we
Please,
give it
please.
to Professor Bhuttaraji for
Yeah.
vote of thanks, you finish, then I just want to add 1 or 2 minutes. That's all.
Okay, but shall I go ahead?
No, I'll have to say 1 or 2 minutes only.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Right. Now, I would like to mention that the point which Dr. Dilip Singh mentioned, there is a need to write more books, more literature on the local body governance and the elections of the local bodies. In Maharashtra, just want to mention, between 2014 and 2019, we did live research on nearly 20 topics. And this research was a kind of an eye-opener, number one. Yeah. And number two, we got some books published giving the details of the elections, the magnitude, the problems, the challenges. Some of the books are in English, but most of them are in Marathi. Yes, so therefore there is a definite need for more books from after the due research, which will be useful throughout the country. Number one. Number two, I personally feel, after hearing to all the participants, that in spite of 25 years of 73rd and 74th amendments, things have not moved in the expected directions, but in fact, they have slid back. They have slided back. So maybe, I do not know, somebody will have to think very seriously of filing the petitions in the Supreme Court, saying that the constitutional mandate is not being fulfilled or is getting adversely affected by the various actions of the various state governments. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will go to Bhutada sir for thanking.
Short intervention, sir. Just a very short intervention.
Yeah.
We should stop using the word local self-government. The word in the constitution is units of self-governance. Historically, if you see, sovereignty and state structures have evolved from the city-states. In Europe, from the Greek and Roman city-states and medieval period Italian city-states, and in India from Vaishali and all these other small city-states. And even in modern India, the democratic process has started from the late 19th century when the municipal boards and other such units were set up, and then these evolved more and more and more and more powers were devoluted to them. Yeah. So the constitutional word is units to self-government, and that will avoid the top-down. We are thinking every time we are talking of devolution, because we naturalize this whole process, which is actually a social process, that it is coming from down, but actually sovereignty is coming from below. So we should use the word units of self-governance and not the word local, which is sort of, in English, it's also used as a word of a slightly derogatory status also, when it is used in social interaction. So I think we should correct this. That will lead to a lot of conceptual clarity also.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, shall we go to Bhutada sir, who is a professor who has developed True Voter app for our Maharashtra Election Commission, and he's a professor. At the same time, he's very much interested in actually bringing the solution, IT solutions, and he's running actually Abhinav IT Solutions Private Limited and helping us in this whole process. So Bhutra sir, please go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. And Ishad has started a very good activity. And just it's a pleasure for our company and to me also that to provide some technical support to all such a good activity. Grassroots Democracy Project is a main dream of Saharia sir. And True Voter is also the output of Saharia sir. He has developed the things in his era, and now we have conducted 14,000 Gram Panchayat elections where near about more than 2 lakhs candidates have used the system, and now coming 95 local Nagar Panchayat and Nagar Palika, Nagar Parishad election are coming where GPS voter list is getting created. Now this is another second step where we are doing some revolution. So I am very thankful to everyone for such a for today's program. We got a very good dignitaries, Dr. Govind Rao, who is the former member of 14th Finance Commission, and Mr. Ajit Ranade, who is one of our good friend, being from Maharashtra and doing very well in state election of Maharashtra. And I am very much thankful that these are two persons who are having a very big vision related to economy and related to some finance segment. And so these 3F's are very important and they are focused very nicely. Thank you to these all high dignities. I am very much thankful to state election commissioners who are present here. Mr. Sanjay Srivastav sir, Sanjay Prasad sir, Dalip Singh sir, and a few others who are present here. I'm especially thankful to Naresh Saxena sir and Mukulika Banerjee also, who has given very good input in this program. And doing all these things, not very important is the again the main involvement. This activity of Ishad and ultimately Ishad and True Voter is getting supported by EDR, CLGF and RSCD, because now the activity has become a very big one as many organizations have taken a lead doing all this thing. I am thankful to all participants who has taken part here to just increase the strength of local democracy, local self-government governments. Thanking you to everyone, and not least, but to even Raskar sir, who has conducted the program very nicely. I'm thankful to everybody, and with the permission of chairperson, Mr. Saria sir, I declare that this session is over. Thanking you.
Thanks. I'm
To
very
Raskar
sorry.
sir.
Yeah,
Raskar
I'm
sir.
very sorry. Yeah, I'm very sorry. I forgot to mention Roy P. Thomas sir, State Election Commission of Pondicherry. So please forgive me. And thanks to everyone, even thanks to Bhutra sir. And please be a part of this process, be a part of this campaign, because devolution is not the work or job of 4 or 5 organizations. Everyone who is here, we need your support. Please join hands in this process. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Would you like to see the snow in London?
Yes,
It's
yes, yes.
snowing very heavily. Let me turn the
Yes,
camera.
yes. Those who can see, yes. Wow.
Can you
wow.
see?
Yes, 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 yes. Great.
It is completely within, while we've had this seminar, everything is covered completely in snow. It is suddenly snowing very heavily. So complete contrast to where you are in India at the moment.
So nice.